Thank you for joining us at this time, wherever you are viewing this program across all television stations, also our social media platforms, as we have a impromptu discussion with the Honorable Vice President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Dr. Barrett Jack. Thank you so much for taking time out your busy schedule to be here as we discuss a few matters arising.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So we know that Monday is a very anticipated day in Guyana. It's known as Budget Day, Monday the 16th of January 2023. And Dr. Ashley Singh will be presenting to the National Assembly Budget 2023. It is anticipated across the business sector, across generally the people of Guyana. They want to know how much it will impact them. But I would like us to first reflect on the year 2022 and of this PPPC administration, all that we would have accomplished because of the provisions made through Budget 2022. So in a nutshell, can we discuss how that came to be, how it transformed our country, and some of the major highlights that you would like to mention that were able to benefit all people of Guyana?
Well, I can speak like maybe for a whole week based on what you just asked. But there's one critical thing that you pointed to, the anticipation of the budget. And as someone who's been associated with budgets from 1992, all the way, every single budget of a PPP civic administration, which is over 25 budgets so far we have passed. There's one thing that underlays all of the budget is that the people can rest assured that they're not going to be hardship budgets. I recall in the early period, this was in the 90s, where people used to buy stuff and hoard it. They used to buy foreign currency and keep it before the budget because they're always concerned that some measure would be put in place that would either increase taxes, would make it harder to secure foreign currency or something of that sort, some hardship measure. We have sought over the years to do a number of things. And so the framework has been established very early from our administration. And the budgets are just annual programs to achieve that framework and goal. So the goal often doesn't change, or the goal has not changed. But the budgets every year bring us closer towards achieving those goals. And the goals from the inception were to improve the lives of the people of our country in in every form, socially, economically, culturally, politically, on the right side. And I dare say that we have so far, if you trace the evolution of budgets and of our economic history, you will see how far we have come towards and how much closer to achievement of those goals we are today. So the 2022 budget, or every budget that we have had since we came back into office, were just to pick up on those old goals that we had and ensure that the budgets were supportive of achieving them. I can go through a number of measures, but maybe because you asked for the whole year, and there are lots of things, and I don't want to burden the program too much about that. But if there is any specific thing that you want to mention, we can talk a bit more about those.
Okay. Okay, let's look at this year specifically, because you spoke there about goals and the future of the country and the benefits that it will have on the
Yes.
people. Can you tell us what we can expect broadly, without going in depth? What can the people of Guyana expect from this year's budget, and how does it differ from last year, and put people really at the center this year?
Yes. So you move from last year to this year. I was trying to avoid this year and hoping that we deal specifically with last year. But let me go through this in a little bit more detail. So the first budget that we had when we resumed office, that budget had to fix some of the things that we thought were detrimental to the economic well-being of our nation and also to the social upliftment of our people. And we had promised these things in our manifesto. So we set about delivering those promises. The first thing was to remove a number of taxes, nearly 40 billion if annualized taxes. So that we believe that by doing that, we, along with more predictable policy making in the economic sphere, we have now set the conditions for the resumption of dynamic economic activities in the country. So, and if you look at, it's not just the taxes that we remove, we've been spending more on drainage and irrigation in the farming sector, farm to market roads, in mining area, we have gone beyond the removal of taxes or the return to status quo from the earlier period, and we have given more tax incentives to the mining sector. We have had problems in these areas too, because with the rainfall, it has affected mining, forestry, and other activities. But the environment, the economic environment, is more conducive to growth. We have co-invested with some local business community, in the local business community. That co-investment has triggered the creation of a couple of new sectors, for example, growing soybean and corn, that would lead to, within a matter of 3 years, self-sufficiency at the national level. We have worked, just now I was speaking to the Minister of Agriculture, we have moved the Swamp Shrimp Project, just a simple thing like that. We have moved from 250,000 pounds per year to 2 million pounds, producing 2 million pounds per year. I can enumerate a number of initiatives in the oil and gas sector. We have passed the local content legislation. That was first in full year of the local content legislation. And if you talk to the Guyanese business community, you would hear now for the first time that they are treated with greater respect by the oil companies, that a lot of opportunities have gone their way. And we're hoping ultimately to have about $700 million of spending by the oil and gas companies that hitherto would have gone abroad, will now be spent using local providers of goods and services. So the business environment has changed radically. And that's why you've seen almost in every sector greater levels of investment. If you look at the credit to the private sector and the borrowing at the bank for economic activities, it has increased tremendously. That signifies greater confidence in the economy and confidence in the direction in which we're going. So we have not only pointed the direction, we have created the enabling environment to allow people to create jobs and to create greater income for themselves, and of course, employment opportunities. And so I can do that by group. So that's on the economic side, the job creation initiative. On the social side, we have also had to do some reversals. We had a huge hemorrhaging of jobs on the last government. massive loss of job even before COVID because of these same policies. So we have set about trying to generate more jobs in the private sector, create the conditions for the generation of more jobs in the private sector. And that is happening. And the construction activities in the country has skyrocketed to a point where we have labor shortages in the construction sector. And then we have supplemented this by more job creation through government initiatives. You know, the part-time employment program, that's about 13,000 people here, 2,500 Amerindians were rehired through the CSO program. So it's a combination of the two to ensure that people had more disposable income and had more economic opportunities. And that has gone really well in the 2 other years that we've been in office. And then ensuring that along the same theme of increasing disposable income, ensuring that people had, like particularly vulnerable groups, receive more support. So you would have heard us mention the return of the Because We Care cash grant, putting $6 billion more in the pockets of the children of the country, increasing pensions, the cash grants that we give out, the wages and salaries increases in the public sector, the return of the joint services bonus. All of these are put in 2022, probably about $60 billion more, nearly $300 million US dollars in net increases in the public sector in terms of wages and salaries or cash transfers into people's pocket. And it has ranged helping the fishermen, the farmers with fertilizer, a whole range of stuff. And it's broad-based and it's across almost every sector in the country. So we have seen that happening. We're now spending much more on healthcare. So in 2022, these were, and of course the budgets that we passed since we assumed office, those were the big themes. Economic dynamism, diversification of the economy, more opportunities for people, higher paying jobs, more job creation. And then secondly, improving welfare for people and better quality education, more investments in education and healthcare. The third area is the support infrastructure on bridges, roads, power plants, and all of those things that you have seen. I don't want to repeat a lot of what we have done, like the massive gas to energy project, which has been signed and will triple or double our electricity install capacity by 2024 and reduce prices by half. And that project, we have closed it in 2022, and it's now in the implementation phase with the bridges, the highways, etc. So we have made tremendous progress on the supportive infrastructure, and that is for the long term. It is not short term. So you would see a balance between addressing immediate needs of people, helping them now, but also planning for the future. Another big area is, and along the theme of social sector improvement, is housing. We have already in 2 years or so given out over 20-something thousand house lots. In this year's budget, we have a massive allocation to develop maybe another 20,000 house lots. Because we promised some 50,000 house lots in the 5 years. We'll probably have to overshoot that to meet the demand that we have, and we've even gone into the housing sector. So in 2023, without getting into specifics, you will see a return of all of these issues. The healthcare, you already know, because we have not been shy about it, about what our plans are. So the 2023 budget will provide the means to support that plan. And that's 7 new hospitals, rehabilitation of the Georgetown Hospital, Linden, Bartica, 4 new diagnostic centers with teleconferencing, telemedicine facilities in Region 1, 7, 8, and 9. Possibly rebuilding the New Amsterdam, a new hospital at New Amsterdam, a whole range of investments there. So these were known this year, and the next year's budget will provide the means of achieving those. So we've already, similarly, the new budget will provide the means to achieve the gas to energy project, the transmission improvement in the country, etc. So it's not like many new teams. One thing that we in the PPP believe in, that the only way you achieve things is not to jump around, is to have a core set of ideas and then have policy consistency. So every year you return to these, and then they lead to the solving of problems, the achievement of those goals that we spoke of at the beginning, the strategic goals, that is housing all of our people, getting world-class education to them, world-class healthcare to them, decent infrastructure for transport across the country for business and commuters, security in our homes. All of these are strategic goals. So they would all be supportive through various initiatives in the budget. For example, it's known already that we said we want to make Lusignan an area where we'd house all of our prisoners. You know, you saw the conditions people were living there. They were living in fields at one time, the prisoners. So since we got into office, we built 3 buildings. We're about to complete those. And we're constructing another 3 buildings. Together, at the end of this year, hopefully they'll be completed. They should be able to accommodate 1,500 of the prisoners. So we can possibly focus most of it will be the major center for hosting prisoners. But we want to change things too. We would have a building here for the women's prisoners. We want to do a field for sports. We are building an academic school, so every prisoner has to go to classes. We're building a trade school there. So a lot of that sort of environment, so that when you put people in prison, there is a serious attempt at reformation. And that the budget will just give effect to something that we have outlined already, and that is known. And so too, on the social sectors, we made it clear we want to get the kids, the crash grant to 50,000. We promised that. So we'd have to continue, increasing the amounts. The pensioners, we want to double pensioners' money. So we'd have to continue all of these things. They're not new things many new things in the budget, but they are important things to achieving the goals of the future. And so that is how we have approached it. I'm just thinking about, I don't want to give too many details because
That's okay.
the Minister of Finance has to speak about
I understand.
these matters.
In the things that you would have been highlighting, it is clear that some of these measures are overarching. Like any budget, some might affect the others. But I want us to focus, you mentioned there agriculture and the developments that we have seen.
Yes.
Can we talk a little bit about Budget 2023, aiding Vision 25 by 2025? The entire Caribbean region is moving
Yes.
towards that, and food security. and the government has revitalized the agriculture sector.
Yeah.
More people are getting involved
Yeah,
and
sure.
on board. So can we talk a little bit about that?
So Minister Singh will point out there are several initiatives and we've budgeted pretty large sums of money to support the growth in the agricultural sector. So you'd see a lot of support to new sectors sectors that can supply the domestic market. I don't want to go into details, but there are about three major areas of focus.
Okay.
And one will be focused largely on support to industries in the agricultural sector. The president has spoken about this already. So, like cut flowers, you know, we can have a thriving industry here.
Yeah.
So the technology, bringing in the skilled people to make this an industry with the best technology in the world, so it becomes competitive. Things like growing all of the demand that we need for cauliflower and those things, but doing it with a small support but very intensive, high. It must be done with a high level of productivity so that the costs could be competitive. These are the kinds of things we are looking at. We've been working on a shrimp project just before I came here. I was talking to the person who has been working on this. And this is outside of the swamp shrimp. This is to look at doing shrimp in ponds for export. Ecuador has a $7 billion industry now, starting from very little. A $7 billion US industry. And we have the conditions here. We'd have to then look at hemp and growing that. So there are lots of support in the budget for agriculture because we take this seriously. And in the involvement of young people in agriculture and the technology. But again, this is not like anything spectacularly new.
Yeah.
That's what we're not looking for newness. We're looking for consistency in what we have said. And the budget is not a PR document. It is a policy document with resources to support the goals that you have outlined. And a lot of those goals have been outlined either through our national development strategy or our manifesto. So some people just look for newness all the time, you know, but it's more a solid, sturdy foundation type budget that moves us forward, that pays particular attention to our oil resources and how we utilize them to create the conditions for future growth. On the climate side, focusing heavily on adaptation to climate change. So some of the resources that we've earned from already, we've had some of the money paid over, from the sale of forest carbon, but we anticipate that about $150 million would be available for spending. And the Amerindian communities, I met with the Tushao Council, they already have, I think, about 17 million of that for their own village development plans. But most of that money will go towards adaptation needs. So how do we better manage water? Since our biggest vulnerability is flooding, rainfall, unusual rainfall. And so a great attention would be spent, paid on putting in the structures and the policy and the capacity, whether it's pumping capacity, to prevent flooding and to manage water, for especially in the farmlands and stuff like that. We suffer huge losses as a country every year because of that, because of climate change and because of the unusual amounts of rainfall that we've had. So this year's budget will also support that objective strongly.
Thank you. You were mentioning earlier, we're talking a little bit about business development, and the government has been investing in the business community by simple measures, like you were saying, lifting or removing some of those taxation or burdensome taxes
Yes.
for the private sector. This is a twofold question. My first question to you is, how will that be sustained in budget 2023? We know things like cheaper and more affordable energy will lead to greater manufacturing capacity for our
Capacity.
country. And then also we see President Ali right now leading a delegation in India.
Yes.
There are stronger connections within private sector, within governments across the entire world, and an interest in Guyana. How will these be sustained by the provision of budget 2023?
Yeah. So a lot of the initiatives, it's not just, as I said before, you have to take the whole economic policy, not a single budget,
Yeah.
to understand the big picture of what we're trying to achieve. So this is where we're hoping to capitalize on the interest in Guyana, because a lot of people are interested in our country. One, we have a predictable, clear economic strategy. Our business environment is a very competitive one, and it is becoming even more competitive and also encouraging in terms of the fiscal incentives available to invest in Guyana. So it's not a surprise that so many people are interested. We've already gotten quite a number of interest in the bid round, the new bid round that we launched for the oil blocks, and we have interest in almost every single area of economic activity, from agriculture to manufacturing, construction, because they all recognize the hospitality sector is a massively growing sector, because they recognize that this country has a great economic future. That economic future is not a given. It could easily be eroded by a fickle government, a government that is not clear on what it wants to achieve. And that is why we said we are not going to be anecdotal and convenient. We're not going to be like APNU. When you're in government, you don't want to renegotiate the contract with Exxon, and when you're out of government, you want it renegotiated. In opposition, we said no, we're not renegotiating the Stabroek one, but here is what we're going to do. Any new contract signed, even by Exxon, including for Kaieteur and Ganji and the other blocks, they would have new fiscal terms and a new PSA. We're working on the new PSA. We've established the new fiscal terms. From a 2% royalty to a 10% royalty, from 0 taxes to 10% taxes, corporate tax, from 75% for cost recovery to 65%. So greater share is available for distribution very early. And then smaller blocks, so there is no need to ring fence. We have done that. We kept our promise. We're not fickle-minded. We said we'll get more from this company and from Exxon investment here through the gas to energy project. So we're working. They now have agreed to fund the pipeline through cost oil. So we don't have to go and raise a loan to do that. And secondly, the gas comes in for free. So that we're generating power. So the cost of generation of power is unbelievably low for us. And we can sell it at 15 cents per kilowatt hour, half of the price that we're selling it at now, and make a huge profit still. And the whole project is paid back for by the liquids that we get from cleaning the gas, which is the cooking gas and everything else, and which we can export to. So we are getting much more there. And then we said we will get more through the local content legislation. We passed that law. Our people are already benefiting from it. So we've been very careful about our promises. We said we're working on a new petroleum act. We're doing that now. We said we'll auction new blocks. We're doing that. So and this is all in opposition. We listed these things. We didn't, if you talk to the leader of the opposition today, doesn't have a clue about anything in the sector, especially if it gets a bit complex. We did this in opposition. We're clear there. So we're not going to be fickle-minded and run off on whims of fancy, like you listen to Glenn Lyle or some of the others. That is what differentiates us in the PPP from the other political parties. Stable, predictable, and that's important for investors, but not a pushover. Stable and predictable doesn't mean being a pushover, because we're probably some of the toughest negotiators, as you've seen from the deals themselves. Look at the environmental permit that APNO used to gave, the first two projects. If you look at the ones now, they're online, they're posted. Guyana should just compare the two. Now we got Exxon to agree to the grave management of waste, to treat the wastewater that they discharge offshore to an international standard. They now have a carbon tax on any unscheduled emissions, flaring, a zero flaring policy, apart from a number of other things that were not in environmental permits before. So these are important things for us. That is why I'm saying the investors tend to be attracted to that sort of clarity in policy. And that's what we have. We don't get swayed by one editorial written by someone in one newspaper in a single day. And often the person in the editorial it doesn't even have the facts, and which could often sway public opinions. People believe, like because it sounds attractive. That is what we have to avoid. So you're not going to find budgets that are big on rhetoric and attractiveness of that nature. One budget we say something, another budget we do something. There is a consistency in every budget, and that is needed in economic policy making. That's how you achieve things. So that is why, whether it's India, whether we go to India or Dubai or the United States of America or Brazil, wherever, people are flocking here for investment purposes. And there are lots of economic opportunities now coming out of Guyana that some which our local private sector can't handle because of the scale. So they find that attractive too. So we're going to continue doing this because we need both the foreign investment and we need our local guys to step up too.
On the topic of oil and gas, building on our oil and gas economy, I want us to look a little bit. Of course, the PPC administration has been on that transformational agenda towards development. I want to look specifically at, you mentioned in there, the public auction going for the oil blocks and even the carbon credits. Can we talk about what this really represents for our country, for our people, and the sustainability of our country too?
Yes. So on the whole, if you go back on the history of a pricing for forest carbon, you would see that Guyana has been in the forefront of the struggle to establish a value to the forests around the world. The developed world has been quick to identify and support the other mitigation options. So they would point out that burning fossil fuel for energy or transport contributes to maybe over 60% of greenhouse gases. So those two initiatives, anything to reduce emissions through those that arise from those two sources have been supported through the compliance market, carbon markets around the world. But forest deforestation and land degradation have caused about maybe 16 to 20% of the greenhouse gases. But nobody wants to put money into stopping this. Although you cannot achieve net zero or a 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial level by 2050, if you don't, because we believe that a lot of these forests are in countries like ours, Africa, Latin America, some in Asia. And so they believe that we must do this for free, contribute to the world. But it's the mitigation solutions that are in the developed world, people get paid to be responsible there. So we said no. And that was the genesis of this, that our forests contribute to a global public good. And that must also be paid for, just like you pay for other mitigation solutions. It's not mercenary, it's just a recognition of the important role that forests play. So you would never really be able to put a value on forest carbon versus the others, because along with forest carbon and the preservation of forests, there are a whole range of other benefits, ecosystem benefits. For example, the preservation of forest biodiversity. These are major watersheds. If you don't have the Amazon, North American rainfall patterns will change completely. So they contribute much more. And if we had to put a real value to these forests, the price should be far superior than the price at which carbon is traded around the world. But in spite of that, carbon is traded at, say, in compliance markets at maybe $70 to $90 per ton. Now there's no major compliance market for forests. And you can get between maybe $4 to $7 per ton forest carbon in the voluntary markets. So that's not working for us. So we fought for too many, and I'm not going to go through the long history of it. We had one of the first low carbon development strategies in the world. We had APNU saying it's nonsense, refused to participate. We had Ramjatan and Trotman and several people from NGOs wrote Norway to prevent us getting the money. Ironically, that was money that we earned that was available when APNU took office. And they spent some of it, including giving out grants to people. And now that I'm talking about it, they give out some grants to people from $8 million US that was set there, and some loans. And I don't think we have even, since we got back in office, it just triggered my memory, check those, whether there's who they gave loans to, have been repaying the loans from that money. But I'm going to check that when I leave this program here today. So we've had a long struggle. And then we came out of office, and we had a disastrous period for climate initiatives in Guyana in those years. So they were running off behind this Green State strategy, called in some foreign groups to work on it. So the first thing we did when we got back into office, and we said this in opposition, that we're going to scrap the Green State strategy, that we're going to do an expanded LCDS. And the expanded LCDS now covers the blue economy or the marine economy. It covers adaptation. It covers biodiversity, water management, apart from forest carbon. Deals with this question whether you can be an oil producer and still retain your environmental credentials and still support a net zero target. And we've demonstrated in that you can do that. We've pointed out that we support removal of subsidy on fossil fuel globally. We support net zero target. And we support early decarbonization of the world, the global economy, and we will support a price on carbon. Now, most oil producers don't do that. They don't do that, and we supported every one of those global objectives. And then we said, our forest is such a big sink that even with 10 FPSOs out there, we would use less than 10% of the annual sequestration of CO2 gases from the atmosphere. Our forest sequesters about 154 million tons per annum. We will probably emit about 18 million tons with 10 FPSOs. So we still remain a carbon sink. So we're already at net zero where the world wants to be in 2050. In fact, we are carbon negative now. Yeah. So we had to point all of this out. Sometimes this nuance gets lost. And then we worked early, as soon as we got back in, to get our forest carbon certified. Now that's a rigorous process. And we're the only country now, it's a great achievement, to have a jurisdictional scale, national scale certification for forest carbon in the whole world. We're the only country in the world. So that is why, and some of this now can be used by the airlines for the compliance markets. So that is why people wanted to buy our forest carbon. We got this offer at $15 per ton for vintage or legacy carbon that's from 2016 to 2020. So the period that has passed, we're still getting paid for that. And then $20 per ton from 2020 to 2025, and then $25 per ton in the future. Now, assuming someone sells this and they make more money, we share the upside benefit, 60% of it. So that has brought in a significant and will bring in a significant amount of money to the Treasury, over at a minimum $700 million for just 30% of our forest carbon. We still have 70% that we can sell in the future. So this will make a huge difference to using the money can then be used for the purposes I said, for Amerindian development and for adaptation and for other things. So this is the balance that we're trying to strike. The oil and gas sector, the money that we earn must be used to create more sustainable sectors in the economy. So when the oil goes, we have those to turn to. It must help us to adapt for climate change so we can be more resilient. So the oil and gas money shouldn't be squandered. And that is why we said we need to accelerate the production so we can transfer these from a natural resource asset to a financial asset, and then utilize these, invest these wisely in the future through the Sovereign Wealth Fund or through initiatives.
We were talking there about adaptations. Can you highlight some of the measures that will continue to unfold as the LCDS 2030
Yeah,
goes
sure.
on?
So consistent with what we said before, we have worked on several plans. So earlier last year, we met with representative groups from several regions, 2, 3, 5, and 6. And we discussed comprehensive plans for drainage and irrigation in those areas, including building like Hope Light canals to drain water from the backlands directly into the Atlantic, bypassing the villages, because in some regions the water has nowhere to go, so it comes down, it floods out the villages, etc., damages crops. So this year we're going to be moving on implementing some of those projects. In the Pomeroon, we've already started dredging them out of the Pomeroon, and we've put in some excavators there on pontoons to help with the empouldering of land. Here on the East Coast and across the country, we need to buy more pumping capacity because we have less storage as more areas are converted into housing. So we don't have much storage areas for water. So it means that we have to get the water out faster. So we have to buy greater pumping capacity. So a lot of these plans have been worked on over an extensive period since we've been in office. So now resources from the oil and gas sector and from the sale of forest carbon can help to fund and accelerate the implementation of many of these adaptation activities. In the hinterland, ensuring that we can manage floods and droughts with a greater capacity. So these are some of the projects that we've had in mind.
Dr. Jagdeo, as we look at the global landscape, the challenges brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic, global supply freight challenges also, these have all led across the world to increases in the cost of living. The government has had or have been rolling out measures over the 2022 period for ensuring that persons are able to, deal with those effects of the cost of living. So can we talk a little bit about what we can expect in this year?
Sure. So there will be provision again, like we had in 2022, we set aside $5 billion to assist through several initiatives to offset the cost of living. But apart from that, we did a number of other things. For low-income housing, we offered the program where we would supply free steel and cement for the foundation for those buildings. We changed the calculation rate for the taxes to use the old freight rate. We had some direct cash intervention into many communities in many areas. So there are a number of initiatives that we put in place, including the push to put more disposable income in people's pockets and increase employment so they can better cope with the increases that we saw that COVID and the war in Ukraine caused. We've seen now the normalization a bit. So take, for example, freight rates were like $3,000, $4,000 for a container from China. Pre-COVID, it went to $20,000. Now it's down back to $5,000, $6,000. So we believe that and China is now going through a period of high rates of infection, but we believe that once they emerge from this, you would have, and the total lockdown policy, you would have a return to normalcy and the supply chain will improve tremendously. So we believe that this year should be better in terms of greater supplies, predictability of supplies, lower freight, and hopefully lower cost for many of these items. Notwithstanding that, we are going to watch it carefully, and we are making provisions for that in the budget, some provision to assist, but we're hoping that the situation would resolve itself. The spike that we saw will abate a bit.
Yeah. I'd like us to touch a little bit on the development that we have been seeing across since the government's assumption in office in communities specifically, and also those regarding youth development. What other strengthening mechanisms can we see continuing over this year to benefit those cross sections of society?
So if you check our manifesto, we made some commitments on the youth development and sport. We set aside a significant sum of money this year to achieve those issues. And then on community development, if you look at, we've been saying this for a while now, so it's not new. And I'm just going to repeat what I've already been saying. That the first 2 years, we had to focus on the immediate issues, which is reversal of taxes, etc., to get things going. And then, and the big projects, highways, power plants, all of the big projects we got. And I'm not going to list them. There are many. New hospitals, etc., getting those contracts ready. So towards the mid last year, when we started going out, we started shifting our focus to community infrastructure, because that has been neglected for a long time. And this year, you're going to see a massive focus on community infrastructure. So roads in communities, that's the biggest concern of people, roads and drainage. And there'll be thousands of new roads done in the communities this year. And also, we made it clear since last year that all the roads to public buildings, to schools, to health clinics, all of those must be top priority now. So, consistent with what we said last year, the budget makes provision for that.
As we're coming down to program time, I want us to touch on some misinformation campaigns that we've been seeing. Since the government's return into office, one of the things that we have heard is that we are going to be building a diversified economy. Over the previous administration, we saw only efforts being placed in oil and gas and nothing in agriculture or education significant. And the opposition at this time have been, taking to social media or taking to their various spaces and making certain allegations against the government regarding measures or things that are being done. How do you respond to these things, and what will the government continue to do over this year?
So that's the difference. It was when I was discussing about the need to be consistent and to have clarity in a framework and not to be fickle-minded. This is precisely what I had in mind, the type of opposition that we have. So because it is like it has always been fickle and not clear about its policy making. After 28 years in office, the result was that Guyana was one of the poorest countries in the world. And then in 5 years that they resumed office, they started the downward trend again. Borrowing, spending on the capital side, spending less in each of the 5 years than the 2014 period. So no building for the future, nothing about future consuming. So that's where, if you look at the recurrent budget under the PPP, you'll see the recurrent budget has grown, but the capital budget has more than tripled. That is building for the future. It's building the capital stock and the social stock. That's on both of an economic nature and a social nature, the capital stock of the country, to deliver better health care, better education, supportive infrastructure for expansion of the economy, diversification. So all you have to do is to check the budget, but it is the macro thing. They believe that you can wish a sector, when you talk diversification, you can wish a sector into being. You can't. It requires multiple years of hard work to get it going, and consistent work and the right environment. And you would see one of the reasons why we had a reversal of economic fortune is because they were not clear what they were doing. For example, 1 year, they increased the tributers tax from 10% to 20%. And then we complain about it, and the next year they drop it back to 10%. That is the nature of the opposition. So I'm not going to pay too much attention to what they say. In the opposition, they never talk economic policy. Everything, at the end of it, it boils down to race, one issue. Nothing about a sensible debate on economic policy. When we possibly would never have that in the way they conduct themselves in Parliament. So that's why, even for me, I'm now very interested in what goes on there.
Thank you. As we close off this interview at this time, I would like to ask you, what are your anticipations, or what can you say to the people of Guyana on their expectations of Monday the 16th?
Yeah, well, as I said before, they can expect a budget that doesn't bring hardship to people, unlike the past, and a budget that is consistent and that builds on all of the things that we talk about and the commitments we made, and a budget that is geared towards fulfilling what we promised at election time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to you, our listeners and viewers of this impromptu interview, as we discussed Budget 2023 amongst a whole host of measures being implemented and rolled out under the PPPC administration. I was your host, Travis Bruce. Thanks for joining us.